I genuinely believe that the fastest way to find a billion-dollar idea is to let your competitors do all the work for you. And this is what I mean by that. If you're a founder, and a lot of founders think like this, where they get excited about an idea and they see some competition, someone who's already doing this, and they get discouraged. They're like, crap, somebody's already building this. Let me think of a new idea right now. But here's a reality that I want you to understand. If there's no competition, the market itself probably doesn't exist. And if there is competition, the actual opportunity is hiding in the weaknesses of your competition. Let me tell you a story of how really kick-ass entrepreneurs exploit this. Rujul Zupade is probably a name that you're not familiar with, but he's a second-time entrepreneur, and he even used to be a partner at YC before he started his second company. The story goes like this. He really wanted to build a software business, but he didn't know what business. So he decided to go through every single enterprise category on Gartner and study the incumbents who are building in that particular space. In total, he probably reviewed hundreds of thousands of reviews across the incumbents, the biggest players in every single category. And what he realized was that the biggest incumbent in the procurement space, a very, very large category by the way, was a company called Coupa. And they had a ton of complaints from their customers. Now, Rujul saw this as a map. He reverse engineered his startup idea based on his competition's weakness. And guess what? His company, it's called Zip. It's today valued at over $2.2 billion. Cool approach, no? If you found this approach interesting, this is how I would apply it. First, pick a market where there are already people spending money. It could be the edtech space, the fintech space, or if you're interested in shoes and sneakers, it could even be that particular space. It doesn't matter. Pick something that you find very interesting. Map the top 3 to 5 players that provide a solution in this space. And then read customer reviews for each of these players. And finally, build the thing that the customers wish that the current players would fix or build. By following this approach, a few things happen. First, your roadmap is already ready. And second, if you're smart about it, you already know who your first set of customers are going to be. It's the ones who wrote the 1-star reviews. Before I talk about the second framework, let me zoom out for a second because I truly believe that this is how the biggest companies are born. So every 5 to 10 years, something fundamental shifts in the world. And for about 18 to 36 months, there's a window that opens for new opportunities. This is where brand new billion-dollar ideas suddenly become possible. And this isn't because founders got smarter, and it's not because funding got easier, but it's because the world itself fundamentally shifted under everyone's feet. Take Ola for example. It emerged as a company because smartphones with GPS chips suddenly became ubiquitous in India. Razorpay is another example. They grew because more and more digital companies were being set up and they needed a better way to collect digital payments, and Razorpay provided that solution. And right now, there's another massive shift that's happening in plain sight, something that most people aren't watching. Because of what's happening with Trump and tariffs in America, there's a reverse globalization trend happening all over the world. Countries are racing to build domestic capabilities on things that they used to import. And if you're smart and you do your research properly, you would see that India still imports absurd amounts of different products, aerospace parts, machinery for defense, gold, and much, much more. Within the next decade, I firmly believe that many founders in India are going to build massive businesses where a bunch of these imports are going to be produced domestically. Cool framework, right? And I'm sure a bunch of you will be excited to apply it. But this is one thing I want you to watch out for. Make sure you go after real trends versus fake trends. So what's a fake trend? It's a problem that comes up that's usually transitionary in nature. Take COVID for example. It was something that disrupted things across the world. And if you think back to 2019, 2020, there were a whole bunch of companies that came up that was focused on making remote work more convenient. There were companies that set up that made hosting virtual events a lot more easier. And these companies quickly scaled up their revenue. But most of these companies had to pivot or shut shop after COVID ended. So this is what I want you to do tonight. List 3 big changes that you see happening around you. Something that you think is going to stick. Your next idea may be hiding in that list. And in case you're interested, I've put together a short report with 3 to 4 trends, just like the tariff example, that could lead to really interesting businesses. You can grab it using a link in the description. Now let's talk about the next framework. But before I tell you what it is, let me tell you about a short way to kill your business. And that's by competing head-on with an Amazon or an Uber. Contrary to what people think, very large companies actually move with a lot of speed in markets that they're already familiar with. But they have 2 big weaknesses. First, they only go after opportunities once they're convinced it could make a meaningful impact on their bottom line, which in the case of a company like Amazon is billions of dollars. The second big weakness that they have is that they're not as nimble when it comes to making changes. So this framework is about picking a small wedge or a niche in a really large market that an incumbent finds too small or too silly. The most recent example that I'm sure a lot of you watching this video might be familiar with was about Zepto and the entire quick commerce revolution. When Zepto started, everyone laughed at them. 10-minute delivery, it's never going to scale. The margins were horrible. The logistics were impossible. And it was an idea that failed everywhere else in the world. And all these popular newspaper publications used to say that this company was going to die in the next 3 months. But that's exactly why it worked. All the big guys back then, Big Basket, Flipkart, Amazon, all ignored this tiny startup because it looked too small, too messy, and too unprofitable. And that gave Zepto the shade it needed to grow. They used a tiny, stupid-looking wedge to break into the massive e-commerce market. And by the time they realized, it wasn't a tiny startup anymore. It was a real threat. I don't just buy my groceries from Zepto anymore. I've bought t-shirts, iPhone chargers, and even my air purifier from the company. So that's the real framework. Find a niche in a larger market where the incumbents can't be bothered to compete. Win there, and then try and expand rapidly, faster than the incumbents react. Here's what you need to be aware of. If your niche is too visible, too profitable, or too obviously scalable, then the incumbents will enter that niche very quickly and you really won't get the shade you need to succeed. The next framework is going to sound obvious, but it's around picking problems that people already pay to solve. This is something that I made a mistake with back in 2016 and 2017. A lot of people who tell you ideas start with a problem, but the reality is that a problem isn't enough. It has to be something that people are willing to pay money to solve. And you can't trust your intuition here. You have to confirm this in the market before you start. I want to share my story of my first business, a vernacular translation platform that I worked on to make the internet more accessible for India's next billion users. I was super ambitious here, and I believe that India is divided into multiple regions and languages, and I thought the only way for companies like Flipkart, Amazon, and Myntra to really grow across the country would be to translate their content, their website, their apps into all these different vernacular languages. This is back in 2017, mind you. This is before Geo and before a whole bunch of users even came online. I worked tirelessly for a year to build something awesome that I thought would wow customers. And believe me, it was an amazing demo. Then, when I felt ready, I reached out and I even got a meeting with Ankit Nagori, who was Flipkart's chief business officer back then. I walked into that meeting thinking that this was a moment that all my work would be validated. He was a really nice guy. He gave me a bunch of time. I was very thankful for it back then. So he listened politely and then said, "Cool demo, Rohit. Yes, there are a bunch of people in India who are more comfortable with Hindi or Tamil. But here's the thing, we've analyzed his audience and we know that they're not going to pay much to buy anything online. So we don't want to really focus on them yet. So great demo, but I'm not sure we can be customers right now." Oh, it felt like I just got punched in the face when he said that. And believe me, he was really nice. He said it very, very well. And then after that, I spoke to a bunch of other people in the industry and they all told me something similar. That was basically a year of my work down the drain. And that's the day I learned something painful. You can have very noble intentions. You can work insanely hard to solve a problem and still build a company that's completely worthless. So if you're a founder, here's my advice to you. Before you write a single line of code or hire a team, or in my case, convince my co-founder to leave an extremely highly paid job in San Francisco and move back to India, have 100 conversations with people who would buy your solution. This isn't just to validate your idea, but to validate their wallet. I skip this step to move fast. But believe me, you're not moving fast when you're skipping this step. You're quietly walking into a multi-year trap. The reality is that unless the market isn't already spending money to solve a problem, you're building a business on hope, not demand. So the next framework is something that I've seen a lot of younger founders follow. They try to build for their personal pain point. And that's a really good approach. But here's the problem. Not every pain is worth building a company around. So a lot of you don't know this, but one of the things I do in my spare time is helping young founders think through their startup idea. Do you want to take a guess on what the most common idea I hear? It's a roommate finder app. It's something that I wanted to build back in 2011 when I graduated from college. I get it. It's a real problem. But here's where this idea falls short. Most people only look for roommates once every 2 to 3 years. And it's really tough to build a consumer business around a problem that happens only once every 2 to 3 years. The other thing that you should watch out for is that some of these personal problems only matter during a particular season in your life. Let me give you an example from my life here. A few years ago, I became a dad. My daughter was born and it was one of the happiest moments of my life. And along with it, one of the biggest challenges me and my wife had was finding a really good nanny. Someone who both me and my wife trusted. And being parents in their 30s, we had plenty of friends who also faced the same problem. And I knew it was a real problem and all of us are willing to spend a lot of money to solve this problem. But when I thought about it, was it something that I wanted to work on for the next 10 years? Absolutely not. So here's my advice to you. If you're trying to build around a personal pain point, just remember these things. Pick problems that happen frequently. And 2, validate that a lot of people face this problem and not just you. And finally, ask yourself if this is something that you see yourself doing for the next 10 years. And be honest here, because 10 years is a very long time. The 6th framework is arguably the most straightforward. Rather than picking a problem you want to solve, pick who you want to solve this problem for. A persona, if you will. This persona could be anything. College students who want to study abroad, sales leaders in companies, or freelancers who want to work with customers in the US. Pick this persona, learn everything about them. Learn about what their anxieties are, what keeps them up at night. What are the things that they say that, oh, I'm going to do this tomorrow instead of today? What are the things that are so painful for them to fix? Where do they spend their time or money? Because once you know that, your product basically builds itself. Your marketing becomes obvious. Your go-to market is straightforward. So this is how you would apply this framework. Pick one persona you can easily access. Talk to around 15 to 20 of them and stack rank their problems. Solve the one that touches money, time, or reputation in that order. If you can find a problem that touches everything, even better. Through these conversations, you should have a very intimate understanding of this persona's problems, shortcuts, and frustrations. And if you find more than one problem to solve, that's excellent. Solve the first one and then move on to the next. You can sell your next solution to the same set of customers. All right, now for the final framework. Some of the best founders I know build a startup around something that they worked on in the past. It's often some kind of an internal tool or process that they worked on at their previous company that they now realize that they can build a company around. Let me tell you a story of my friend who used to work at a SaaS company as a product manager. So if you know, a lot of SaaS companies, they have a sales team and they give up free trials and so on and so forth. And his company was no different. His sales team used to set up all these trial accounts for potential customers and they used to use this to try and get them to convert. One of the biggest problems that his sales team faced was that they had no idea of what exactly these potential customers were doing on these accounts. They couldn't get insights on what their users were doing on the platform. My friend, being a product manager, he set up dashboards on Amplitude and a whole bunch of other analytics tools and even set up workflows to help the sales team solve this problem. But they weren't as comfortable like the product managers to actually go over all these charts to figure out what exactly these users were doing. So he obsessed over this problem and he eventually figured out a solution that would work not just for his company, but basically any company that gave out trials for their prospects. He's now building a startup in the space and I'm trying to invest in his company because I'm super bullish on it. If you're a founder, by taking this approach, you're just commercializing something that you already know works. If you're wondering if this framework could work for you, I want to ask yourself 3 questions. First, was there something you built at your last company that saved them time or made them money? 2, would at least 10 other companies care about what you've built? 3, can you rebuild what you built at your previous company without requiring too much internal context about these other companies who may want your solution. If you answer yes to each of these questions, and by the way, don't just assume that there are 10 other companies who would want the solution, actually speak to people there. But yeah, if you answer yes to each of these questions, that's the blueprint for your startup. But as with any framework, there is a catch here. And the one thing to watch out here though is the build versus buy trap. If what you're building becomes too mission critical for companies, what's going to happen is that your early customers are going to buy your product today and then they're going to figure out a way to build it internally tomorrow. The right founders aim for a sweet spot where your product is important enough that they buy it, but not important enough that they rebuild it. If you hit that sweet spot, it's one of the easiest paths to product market fit. Cool. So there you have it. 7 frameworks to help you figure out an idea that works for you. I genuinely want to make sure you waste as little time and money as you go on to build your startup. So tell me, which of these frameworks did you resonate with the most? Looking forward to reading your comments, and I'll see you in the next one.